Welcome to the Deep Learning course. Today we will talk about convolutional neural networks, or what is called the CNN, which is one of the very first popular model of deep learning. We will talk of CNN in the context of image categorization, as we explained previously in the course. This means that we will take an image and we will input it to the neural network model, which here is basically a function, and this function will give us a probability of what is the object contained in that image. So if there are 1,000 possible objects, for example, like in the ImageNet dataset and competition, then you will have 1,000 probabilities that the object contained in the image is of one of those classes. So the CNN is broken down into a smaller set of functions of layers, and each one of those layers are a neural network, very similar to what we've seen before in the previous lectures. So this neural network can be of a single layer or multiple layers. And remember that before we specified, for example, that a neuron of a following layer can take input from many layers, from many nodes of the previous layer. For example, layer 3 takes input from all the 3 nodes of layer 2. Let's see how this is implemented in a CNN. So first of all, this is a model CNN of the VGG neural network, which is listed there in a link. It has several steps. First step is there's several convolution layers. So this convolution it's very similar to a multi-layer perceptron, but instead of going from one node at the input to one, so multiple single node at the input to one node at the output, we do a convolution of a group of nodes. There's also max pooling layers that pool the input and reduce the dimensionalities. Finally, there's some fully connected layers, and these are very similar to the multi-layer perceptron that we discussed before. There's also threshold layer just after each convolution, which are a nonlinearity that causes the system to become a stack of nonlinear layers. Now let's see each one of these layers one by one in detail. So this is the convolution. This is the most important and the heaviest operation in the convolutional neural network, and that's where they get the name convolutional neural networks. So in general, these convolutions are actually 3D convolution. What that means is, if you look at the top of this column, there's an image, and this image is represented in the figure in the middle as an RGB layer. For example, this image is 224 by 224, typical size for ImageNet neural networks, by 3 because they're free planes, R, G, and B. Okay, when we perform the first convolutional layer, we go from these free maps, so free maps of 224 by 224, to 64 maps of 224 by 224, and this is the output Y that you see on the right side in green. There's a filter in the middle in red, the filter W, with coefficients W, and this filter is a 3 by 3 filter, but operates on each one of the planes. So really, it's a 3 by 3 by 3 3D filter. So what this does is, you can think of it if think of it as the multilayer perceptron that we studied before. Multilayer perceptron, instead of in an input of having several pixels, for example, we would have only one pixel, and the filter is 1 by 1 by 3. So that means that basically we have 3 values, and we're doing a convolution of 1 by 1 to produce one output in green. But in this case, we use convolution. So instead of using doing a 1 by 1 multiplication with the weights, we actually multiply a region on each map, right? And these maps are larger. And the convolution is used because we want to capture the local information about an image that is highly redundant and highly correlated. So we do this convolution, like as you study in several other classes about signal processing. And here the convolution, basically what it is a large product of 3 by 3 by 3 multiplications. There are all the values of the input are multiplied by the value of the filter. They're all added together, and that is the output, basically. The second operation that is part of the convolutional neural network is the element-wide threshold or nonlinear operation. So in most cases we use a rectified linear unit, but we can do something else like hyperbolic tangent or sigmoid or anything else. There's very different kinds of threshold, but so in this case we see that we have element-wise threshold, so rectified linear unit, and basically the formulation is that the output is the max between x, which is the input, and 0. Okay, so the input is below 0, it gets set to 0, and otherwise it stays the same. So it's like a non-linear step function. And this basically has the input and the output of the same dimension, and each pixel in the input correlates 1 pixel in the output. So it's an element-wise operation. So this is fairly simple, really, and can be very well parallelized. The last operation of convolutional neural network is max pooling. So max pooling takes basically the input and it downsamples it in space. So for example, here the input is in blue 224 by 224 64 maps. Each one of these maps basically is taken in isolation or together, and we create another 64 maps, but this time we reduce the dimension on x and y. So for example, we downsample by 2, we divide x and y by 2. One such operation that we do is the max pooling. Okay, so when you do max pooling and downsampling, these are the result down here, example that you might get. Basically, you get the same input image that you had before, but it's a smaller dimension. And this is done because we want to identify things in the image, and so as we go deeper in the network and we combine more features, we might lose localization ability, but because we are trying to classify a whole region of pixels, so we want to go from, say, 220 to 220 for a smaller number of pixels at the end. This is how max pooling works. So for each map, for example, take this multicolored matrices at the bottom here of the image. You see that the input is like this, and there are some groups, a red group, yellow, blue, and green. And for each group, we basically pick the maximum, and then we put them in the map that is just below the output green. So this is how the actual operation is performed. And so these three modules, convolution, threshold or nonlinearity, and max pooling, are really the workhorse of convolutional neural network. Then we have multi-layer classifier at the end, and this you already know. They are basically the multi-layer perceptron that we've seen. There's just a slight difference here, which is that notice that usually at the output of a convolutional neural network, so look at that rectangle box container of 512 by 7 by 7. That is the output of the convolutional neural network. Usually convolutional neural network might not be able to give you a number of features like 512 by 1 by 1. Some of them do. Some of them have still have some special content. So 512 by 7 by 7. And then, so what we want to do before going into the multi-layer classifier is we take this all vector of values and we put them in a linear format. So we make a linear array of 512 by 7 by 7. And then we do a multi-layer perceptron. We filter W and then an output. And we might do this a few times. So here the output is 4096 vector of 1 by 1. And what this 4096 vector does is the first one, it basically contains all the information about the image in a code. So this is called the representation, and this is like the most valuable output of a convolutional neural network. The better the representation is, the best. The rest of the convolutional, the fully connected layer and the multi-layer classifier, I used to create a classifier to classify into a set of outputs. For example, here we have 1,000 categories. If the very, very last layer of a CNN could be a softmax, which basically takes all the output of the multi-layer perceptron, which could go from -1 to 1, and basically turns it into a probability using this formula, element-wise softmax, turns it into a probability. Here is an example. For example, the output of the last layer of a MLP could have a fairly large value, but we want to, for simplicity, we like to have them as a pseudo probability, so that we know we can quantify what's the probability of this image containing a specific class. And that's all. This is basically, these are the main operation of a convolutional neural network, and I strongly encourage you to go and read or review your understanding, especially of convolution or 3D convolution, because it's extremely important to understand this. Now, let's finish this course by asking ourselves, okay, now we created this giant function of function, this convolutional neural network, but what do they really learn? So this convolutional neural network can be shallow, so have a few layers like older models, or it can be very deep, like recent residual network that went up to 1,000 layers, which is quite high. In any case, if we look at the first part, we might have low-level features. In the middle, we might have mid-level features, and then we have high-level features. So what are those basically? So the low-level features are very similar to line detector or color detector, or boundaries between two colors. They're very similar to the cell in V1 in our visual cortex of humans, and basically are the primitive of vision. They basically look for edges in an image, because edges are the most important component at the lowest level, right? When we go to mid-level features, the convolutional neural network slowly combine features together into objects. So now we went through a few convolutional layers, and also we subsampled the input image. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to combine these small pieces of lines, line detector from low-level features, into more complex ensembles. So now here you might see more complicated, sophisticated pattern, like circular pattern or textures of some kind. And then you have high-level features. So these are the features that come before really the output code of these deep neural networks. And these are usually parts of objects or very refined textures. And this visualization here are visualizations that are made, what is the image that stimulates the most, or what is the steep part of the image that stimulates the most, some of these higher features. So you can see that they are fairly complex pattern. Lastly, we want to talk about training very, very quickly of this convolutional neural network again. So in training, you give an input image to your model. Your model might not be effectively trained yet, but it will give an output probability, right? That is the one that you see at the bottom. Now, this output probability, what you do is you compare it to the ground truth. Ground truth says, this is a dog and it's actually nothing else. So you basically have to subtract the ground truth probabilities from the class probabilities, and then you get an error. We get an error that then we can backpropagate with different differentiable functions, so exactly like we've done for MLP. And these CNN are usually tested on the ImageNet classification, which is a large data set that has 1 million images and 1,000 classes, so 1,000 images per class. And it's been notoriously difficult, but recently convolutional neural network have really taken over. So here you see in this slide what CNN have done in the ImageNet classification. So before the year 2012, they did not really enter the competition, but since the year 2012 have dominated this competition. The first previously was using standard sort of hand-created computer vision routines, but then it's been recently supplanted by convolutional neural network, where you learn all the parameters from data. And we've been going, so if you read the last few lines, we've been going up and up on accuracy. So top 5 accuracy is actually basically if the target is one of the 5 most probable objects that the network says is considered as correct. And so we've been going from 80% or less to almost 100% now, and just the last 2 years we even beat human level in this kind of data set. So these deep neural network and convolutional neural network are becoming extremely efficient, as we will see in a detailed description of the models.